A professional counselor in the Dallas area is growing in popularity for his treatment methods.
How do you talk to kids about terror? And with social media and television, it's everywhere, and it's unavoidable for kids.
Rusty Lozano is the founder of the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy. He's also been nationally recognized for his work with brain mapping.
He's created a gym to work out the mind. His office features an obstacle course.
Rusty Lozano is a licensed professional counselor, helping children with headaches, with anxiety, ADHD, and more.
Here's where Lozano comes in. He teaches kids how to think their pain away with something called biofeedback.
A North Texas therapist is treating patients in this unconventional way.
We have Rusty Lozano who's joining us today. He's a licensed professional counselor.
He put together an unusual treatment for teenagers who are struggling with mental issues, except he's taking this now a step further.
Rusty Lozano, a leading therapist and pediatric biofeedback therapist based in Texas at the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy. And Rusty, thanks for being with us tonight.
Rusty Lozano, a father of 4 and also a professional counselor in Texas, says it's all about being a credible resource to your children.
The Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, your dedicated resource for mental health news, views, and tips you can use. Brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas. And now, here's Rusty.
Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Therapy Hour. Brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas. The Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy is a comprehensive biofeedback center for pediatrics, adolescents, and adults working on pain management, anxiety management, attentional issues, counseling, group therapy. And today, I actually want to bring a little bit of that knowledge and get some more information on a topic that's actually, I think, is pretty hot. Childhood obesity. You know, I've always been curious about how childhood obesity has changed over the years because I grew up in an era where we were a lot more active. We'd play outside until the sun came down, and we didn't have these electronics that kept us busy and indoors. I remember when the Atari system did come out, and a neighbor friend actually had one. We would stay for hours until the parents would ask, "Isn't it getting a little late for you guys?" But we'd always be outside. We'd always be doing something, and it's changed a little bit. But let's talk about childhood obesity and what some of these statistics are. About how things have actually modified and changed over time. I'm going to read to you some statistics and a little bit of information just to kind of define the topic from the Center for Disease Control. According to the CDC, childhood obesity has more than doubled in children and quadrupled in adolescents over the past 30 years. The percentage of children aged 6 to 11 in the United States who were obese increased from 7% in 1980 to nearly 18% in 2012. That's substantial. Similarly, the percentage of adolescents aged 12 to 19 years who were obese increased from 5% to nearly 21% over the same period. Overweight is defined as having excessive body weight for a particular height from fat, muscle, bone, water, or a combination of these factors. Obesity is defined as having excess fat. Overweight and obesity are the result of caloric imbalance, too few calories expended from the amount of calories consumed, and are affected by various genetic, behavioral, and environmental factors. In 2012, more than 1/3 of children and adolescents were overweight or obese. That's pretty incredible. Our segments today, childhood obesity and common questions and concerns. Our second segment, are we taking obesity seriously? The third segment is complications and long-term effects and comorbidity. The comorbidity is what is it combined with other health issues? What other health issues or factors are also present that contribute to the childhood obesity? And then we're going to have our segment, Talk to the Doc. We're going to open the phone lines at 214-787-1190. And we'll take questions and actually talk to our guests today. I'm really excited that you're here. So joining us today is Dr. Halal. He's a pediatrician from Clínicas Mi Doctor of MD Medical Group. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rusty. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Halal, you and I had a conversation the other day, and I was actually on my way to a Stars game with my son, and we were going to go eat some unhealthy food, which we did. And there was a level of concern in your voice about this topic, and this seems like a really passionate topic for you. You work with children, and this is probably something that you see often, I'm sure. And there's a lot of information that you can offer us, but I'm curious. This concern that you have about obesity, how bad is it?
First of all, I would like to thank you very much, Rusty, for hosting me. And on behalf of MD medical groups and clinical doctors, we thank you for having us on the show. And as a pediatrician, I have been seeing and noticing the increased amount of overweight that the kids they're having, and basically we see it on a regular basis in the clinic. And actually, I'm very thankful that you started the show with mentioning the statistics of the prevalence of the increase of the obesity. I'm just going to add a little bit of a scientific point or a little bit of a jolt into it. Again, obesity and overweight has to do with something called a BMI, which is a body mass index. And it's a certain formula. It's very specific, has to do with certain number measured by the actual weight and height. And basically, it gives you a percentile. So to be on a specific side, basically, what they say that if you are anywhere between 5th percentile and 85 percentile, they consider to be normal. So anywhere between 85 to 95 percentile, you are overweight. Passing the 95th percentile, you are obese. So coming back to the statistics, basically back in the 60s and 70s, you're right, the overweight, actually the obesity was about 4 or 5% only. Coming the era of the 2000, it just jumped. And basically we're talking about from 4-5% into 16 to 18%. And actually, there is a certain time in around like 2007 where it jumped into around 20%. And basically it calmed down now because apparently everybody started to give notice how prevalent and how serious the problem is. But we're still way, way worse than any other country in other countries that basically in the advanced world.
And I see that. I've even seen news segments about which is the fattest state, and they talk about and then they happen to show obese people on film, and I don't even think they know they're being filmed. Right. But it talks about this and what these statistics are. What are other common questions that people might have about obesity? Like what are some things that you hear coming into your office?
Actually, a lot of people basically they start to worry about obesity because they think it's like a trend or a disease, and they don't think that basically is that need to change a lifestyle.
So this trend isn't going to go away. I mean, it's not like it's just a fad that we're going to work ourselves out of.
Yes, and actually, let me give you something like really interesting about the trends. For example, in Eastern Europe and Russia, for example, they have obesity about like 15% or less. China is half our percentage. And what they notice also in these studies is basically if you have one parent that is overweight or obese, your chance of your kid to be overweight and obese is 80%.
Wow.
It's really high.
Just because the parents are obese, that influence.
One parent.
Just one parent.
Just parent is obese. Your incidence of having kids that's overweight and obese is more than 80% or around 80%. And the funny thing that basically as a pediatrician, according to the statistics, what they see basically because kids evolve and they grow, what they see is basically at when they are about to hit puberty, 50% of the girls continue to be overweight, and less than 30% of the boys or the males, they lose weight and become like normal weight.
Interesting.
So basically, yes, it's very interesting.
So you see more of a prevalence with females.
With females, correct. So again, that's a concern that the parents, they don't know. And basically, most of them, they are worried about overweight. And they say that basically, how can we solve that? It's a really, really big problem.
You can't, it's like a parent can't really tell their child to go and be active and do these things when they themselves are sitting around and not really living the lifestyle as well. I would think that it wouldn't be very influential. I mean, it would for a point, but then it'd be a point that, well, I don't see you doing anything, so why should I? Why am I eating this food? When you're not following this, you don't have the same diet as I do, or there's a half-hearted effort to kind of really try to improve things. So maybe, we need to look at guidance for parents on how to really help and start the trends, like start something it's healthy that will influence everybody else.
You see, you raise a very important point and very interesting point. Actually, most of the parents, when they come to my clinic and we start discussing basically a healthy way or healthy life or healthy eating, the parents just point the finger at the kid and say, like, you listen. And at this point of conversation, basically, I turn back to the family and I said, basically, if we need to do this, we're going to do it together as a family. I mean, it's not fair to buy the Coke and the soda and the cookies and all the snacks, and you tell your kid, don't eat it because it's not healthy. So basically, it's something that we have to do as a family. So now at this point, the hopefully they start getting the message. It's basically, it's not the kid. It's basically a family matter.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a family matter, and it's going to take. It's like steering the Titanic. It's going to take a combined effort from everybody, a unified effort, and then move in that direction. If you're just joining us, we're visiting with Dr. Halal from the Clínicas Mi Doctor. We will be right back after these messages.
You're listening to the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas.
Hi, we are back, and we were visiting with Dr. Halal from the Clínicas Mi Doctor of MD Medical Group. Where is that office at, by the way? Is it in Plano?
Actually, the MD Doctor Group, they have like many offices, and their trade names is Mi Doctor, MD Kids, and they have offices in Dallas and Houston now.
Mm-hmm.
My particular office is in Plano. It's by the Avenue K and Parker, which is like close to the Fiesta, next to the Fiesta supermarket in Plano.
Got it. Okay. We actually had a really interesting discussion over the break.
Yes.
This next segment is, are we taking obesity seriously? And, you said something that just kind of stumped me, that if you're, and because I've never quite heard it put this way, that if you start slowing down early in your life, then you bring on the onset of these diseases that you experience later in life earlier in your life. So meaning that if you start to become sedentary at 25, then by the time you're 35, you've aged, and you start having there's more stress on the body, more stress on the heart and the liver, and so then you'll start to develop issues over time if this isn't remedied. And so it's really, if you think about it, it's kind of, we're sealing our own fate, because you're more agile, able, and capable at younger ages to do things, especially kids, and than we are when we're in our 50s and 60s, when we're really actually starting to experience the health issues, and we're trying to fight them off. We've already brought a lot of that onto ourselves. And just to kind of mention something, I've one of my brother's very good childhood friends passed away from a heart attack at the age of 44. 44. Yeah. That's really, for me, it's young. It's very young. And so let's talk a little bit about are we taking obesity seriously? What's going on? What's happening with this whole concept of obesity?
I agree with you, Lozano, about the issue of our body slowing down. Basically, I think talking from the physiological point of view, as a human being, when we're young, we are basically designed to be active and going, and basically more into life, and basically achieving our ambition. So by the time you are 30, you're supposed to be really maximize your energy, 30, 35, and start basically working through that. Hitting the 40, 50, you start to slow down a little bit and basically going onward. But apparently, what the researcher came back to say that basically why obesity is so prevalent is basically certain factors that basically start to hit our generation, next generation, early enough. For example, I'm not going to mention too many of them, so I'm sure that everybody knows about these factors, but let me go through them quickly. For example, the environmental factor that the researchers said, that's basically we know that we're having our sedentary life, we are not really active, and we just sit a lot. The second factor, basically, what we are talking about, and it's really interesting point that I'm going to discuss, is basically the sugar-sweetened beverages. So basically, kids nowadays, when you ask them in the clinic, what do you drink? Okay, very rarely you hear the word water. Basically, number one is soda or juice or shakes or fruit punch or any sugary drink. And later on comes the word water. So the concept about that, basically, people will drink a lot of calories without knowing that basically they are hurt themselves. And basically, this is not going anywhere and it's going to change to a fat. Now, the second interesting part is basically what happened is basically now we have a lot of snacks. And what we noticed that basically the snacks have become salty. So the more salty snacks you eat, the more sweet beverages you're going to drink. So it becomes a cycle. You go into snacks and juice and fruit punch and snack, juice, and fruit punch. Very rarely you need water. So basically you're increasing tremendously the amount of calories that you inhale or you take without even knowing that basically I'm just drinking. I'm just eating snacks. I'm not doing anything. Another factor, of course, that we know now, I think we were discussing that during the break, also the TV. The TV and the video games, it just make you glue to the chair. You cannot, basically, they don't want you to leave the chair. They hook you there. So it's very hard. The problem with TV is basically when you go with analyze the TV from the physician or researcher point of view, what does it do to you? It basically slows down your physical activity. It decreases your metabolism, so you are not really moving your heart at different rates or different speeds. So it unclogs your arteries and unclog basically any clog there. The diet that you eat while you're watching TV is a horrible diet. And when you look into the diet of the TV diet or the stuff that you stick in the microwave, is basically full of sodium, preservative, colors, all the bad stuff that basically just tastes good. And you keep eating that without knowing that you're eating. You just keep eating.
And even fast foods, I mean, there's like an incredible amount of sodium in foods. I mean, that's what makes it so good.
I mean, it's so
tasty.
Good. And the last point, which I definitely come to the next factor for obesity, is lack of sleep. You always want to finish the show. So basically, it's okay to stay a little bit late. And what the researcher found, at a point, important point of factor contributing to obesity is basically sleep. What they say is basically nowadays the kids, they sleep less. And when you sleep less, your chance of being overweight is going to be higher. So apparently our lifestyle is more indoor, doing nothing, watching TV and eating, and basically all this factor over time becomes a habit.
Yes. And so then your body begins to slow down. You start to grow all of these issues. Your stress levels go up. You can't handle learning. I mean, you're not as an effective learner. You may have attentional issues. You may have emotional disruptions. Stress factors like migraine headaches. You may have bruxism, grinding your teeth, anxiety. You're susceptible to all of these because your defenses are down.
Correct. I agree with you 100% regarding that notion, because basically your body is what you put into it. So if you, for example, basically you are putting your body into an active mode, it's basically a ready mode. So basically you go and you finish your work and basically you do some exercise and you do your games. I'm not saying that that's not bad to do the games, but at least you are an alert that basically next day in the school you are ready to go and take over the school days. But you watch the TV, you eat, you sleep late, you don't have enough sleep, so you go to school and you hate the day to start with because it's going to be waking up so early, and basically you're grumpy, and basically your school day is just waiting for it to be over so you can go back to sleep and do the cycle over and over again. So that is basically increase a lot tremendously the stress factor and put more on the kids. You're right.
Yeah, and then also we don't really fuel the body. How important is breakfast in the morning? How important is that to kind of get the body acclimated and started? Would you say that? Would you put that on a pretty high level of of significance?
This is very, very important. And my discussion with most of my overweight kids, and this really amazing. They think basically I skip breakfast so I can start losing weight. And breakfast is the most important meal of the day. My mom taught me that. Her mom taught her that.
Yeah.
And we're doing this tradition to our kids all the way.
Yes.
Because basically you cannot starve yourself and basically increase the amount of insulin or basically the hunger. Just basically put this word together. Insulin, when it's like really, really, really low, is basically you are very hungry. So by the time they're reaching lunch, they are starving. So they just gobble everything in their face and they eat as much as possible. Coming back home after school and they are tired and they eat so much again in dinner. The problem we're seeing now, and I think it's not really healthy, is basically kids like to eat until they go to bed. And this is not healthy. So skipping breakfast is not healthy, and eating and sleeping is not healthy too.
Interesting. I have a really pressing question about the breakfast thing. How healthy are those breakfast bars? You know, the already packaged, nutritious little breakfast bars on the go? Are you a big fan of those?
Actually, I mean, it's a good question. In a way that basically when we are discussing with a kid that does not eat breakfast, what I tell them basically is start with something you like. So even in the breakfast bars that they are designed and again with less colors and less preservative, and these are healthy ways. You have fruits, for example. That's considered to be breakfast. You have oatmeals and cereal. That's considered to be breakfast. Anything that you really like. It doesn't have to be ham and cheese. It doesn't have to be like full breakfast.
Doesn't have to be like the whole ham and eggs?
No, it does not. Just basically don't go to school on empty stomach.
Piece of fruit works as well.
There are kids that they wake up in the morning and they drink their Coke and they think it's breakfast.
That's terrible.
That's interesting.
I've been guilty of that. I haven't been able to serve my own coffee. Yes, I've missed my coffee break, and I'll just grab a soda if we go. But I've moved away from drinking sodas. It's terrible stuff. Now I'm a big unsweet iced tea drinker. But as far as the kids go, what sorts of things do you think that we can actually help them with? What's one statement that you could say to parents now about the importance of an early meal or keeping your meals balanced for children?
I think when we talk about the complications in the next segment, I think the one message that I can give to the parents is basically whenever changes need to be done, it has to be done in a family matter. We need to discuss it, sit together as a family, see what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and correct what you're doing wrong. So basically the whole family will work in the same direction rather than giving them instruction what to do and what not to do.
And it's never too late to start.
Never.
It could start today. It's a Sunday, beginning of the week.
And the interesting part, of course, you're right, is basically most of these effects of obesity is reversible. So if you start, you can withdraw and you can stop the progression of all the comorbidity and complication of overweight and obesity.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. I mean, it's very inspiring to hear that as well, because these are you can really take some easy steps to start small and work your way up until it's more attainable.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think that this is a really incredible topic. I'm really learning a lot. I have my own curiosities about this. We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to move on to our next segment.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas.
And we are back. We are discussing childhood obesity with Dr. Hilal from the Clínicas Mi Doctor of MD Medical Group in Plano, Texas. This segment, is kind of going to continue talking about a little bit more about the complications and long-term effects and comorbidity of childhood obesity. Over the break, you had mentioned something about childhood diabetes, and actually, if you were to develop childhood diabetes, if a child develops childhood diabetes earlier in life, their symptoms are much more grave as they get older. I mean, sooner.
Correct. Actually, what we're talking about is the type 2 diabetes, which it developed when the not enough insulin to digest the amount of calorie and the amount of sugar that you are digesting because you are consuming too much, overwhelming the pancreas and overwhelming the insulin. And what the researcher noticed that if you start to develop type 2 diabetes in adolescence and younger age, your progression of diabetes-related complication as compared to those present later in life will be at a faster pace. So your rate of complication, we're talking about the diabetes affecting every single organ in your body. So we're talking about affecting your kidney, affecting your heart, atherosclerosis, affecting your nervous system. So every single disease that basically they notice that if it starts early, it progresses faster. So it's just very alarming. The good news is basically when you start working your diet and you start controlling your weight and obesity, you are always completely reversible. So you can stop the progression of diabetes and the complication. This is the beauty of young age.
And it happens quicker. You have your whole ability to lose weight and get back in shape. It's all present there. They call that, what's the word I'm thinking of? Your absorption rate. Well, you know what I was just thinking of? Type 2 diabetes is so corrosive to the intestines. I mean, I actually did some studies about this or researched it, and because my dad he passed away from complications due to diabetes, and it was very corrosive to his kidneys, and he was on a dialysis machine, and so the presence of this increased sugar in the bloodstream can really damage your intestines. It can damage your organs. What the researchers are now focusing on, but that's what we see now, more prevalent effect of type 2 diabetes, or basically the effect of obesity on the adolescents and younger generation, is the type 2 diabetes, and the effect of the liver. And as we know, the liver is basically the factory of the body. It processes all the food that we eat and basically divide it into the nutrition that the body needs to continue going on and continue working. So the fat that we eat, it has to be reprocessed again into the fat that basically the body will use and store. But when we overwhelm the liver, for example, with all the calories that we're eating, what the researcher noticed that basically we have two kind of things that happen to our liver. We have so much fat that into the liver, we call it fatty liver. Okay, we ignore that. We keep eating and eating. We have this fat will cause later on what you call like fibrosis and bridging. And what that terms mean that you start having form of hepatitis. So overweight and obesity, actually not overweight, let's talk about obesity, is basically a factor for causing hepatitis. Hepatitis, for the people that don't understand what I'm talking about, is basically something like hepatitis C, hepatitis B, the inflammation of your liver. But with obesity, it's more in unnoticed way. You don't have the jaundice. You don't look yellow. You don't have muscle wasting. You don't have that. What you notice is basically you start having some unusual symptoms. You're fatigued. You're tired. You have maybe some pain in your stomach, upper quadrant, right upper quadrant. You're not as able as before, and you don't know why. And basically your liver start to fail, basically to become inflamed, because basically you're not slowing down. You are pushing your liver beyond the limits. What is the job of the liver?
So liver is basically all the food that you eat is basically being processed. So basically amino acid protein being breaking down into amino acid and basically processed in the liver. It just basically conjugate the fat, and the fat is being like absorbed and basically be digested through what we call like bile duct and bile salt secreted by the liver, and it store also glycogen, store the glucose. So basically it is very, very important part of your digestion and your diet.
It breaks down the food to nutrients so that you can
all
actually
the enzymes
be
is actually nutritious for us, yes.
Interesting. So that putting a lot of pressure on the liver, then at an earlier age, that would equal massive symptoms.
Part of the organ or one of the organs that basically accumulate fat, like under the skin, that we have like people with overweight, they have like really developed under skin. Actually, the fat will be stored also in the liver. And this is not a healthy part of storage or storing fat in the liver or in an organ. So that's basically when you start to think that the function of your liver start to slow down and becomes like really, really burdensome.
Interesting. What are some more comorbid disorders that you see with childhood obesity? We talked about diabetes. What are some other things that you see happening with the comorbidity?
There are so many of them, to be honest with you. Before diabetes, they have what you call like a pre-diabetes. And basically, this is when your sugar is high. And there is another indicator called the hemoglobin A1C, which basically measures the amount of certain hemoglobin that basically linked to diabetes. So they can predict if you are not basically taking care of yourself based on these numbers or pre-diabetic numbers, within a few years, you're going to end up with diabetes. So this is basically, it's more prevalent than diabetes.
Interesting.
Other than diabetes, and we have liver disease, and we have, of course, the cardiovascular problems, hypertension, atherosclerosis, coronary heart disease is very prevalent in type 2 diabetes, and because what we call it metabolic syndrome. Now, metabolic syndrome is a very interesting term, and it was designed for adults. And what it is, it's a component of 4 factors, what we call like abdominal obesity, hyperglycemia, which increased blood sugar, dyslipidemia, which increased cholesterol and the triglyceride and the lipid in your blood when you do the blood test, and hypertension.
Interesting.
When you have all these factors together, your risk of having coronary heart disease is sky high, hypertension is sky high, and all the atherosclerotic complications, including strokes and central nervous system or neurological complication is high. What they notice also is, and it's very interesting, that obesity is a risk factor for gallstone. So that's something that is very interesting to know, that they found out that there are a lot of kids, and they, when they do the research and do the ultrasound, they found they have gallstones.
Oh.
And it's associated, now documented factor with overweight. And the risk or the important part that to mention is basically asymptomatic. There is no stomach pain, there is no bending over, there is no problem eating fat food. Basically, it is there. And when it's going to strike, nobody knows.
And that's when you require surgery, you have instant symptoms. I know even my own family, my mom just recently had hers removed a few days ago. So you're right, and she really showed no symptoms at all. But for kids, that's a scary component. It's a really scary thing because they're our kryptonite.
You see, the way that we were studying in medical school is basically gallstone happens at usually females at older age because pregnancy and labor and the way that they're living and basically slow down and the weight, but mainly it happened at older age. Now we see that more developing now at younger age group.
Yeah, that's a scary.
Just simply because of overweight, yes.
Yeah. And it not only affects them health-wise, but also mental health. Think about body image, depression. You start seeing kids that have a low self-esteem. They get maybe picked on and they feel really bad about themselves, which can even worsen the syndrome because they may comfort eat or they may want to stay indoors and not want to be active, may want to sleep a lot. And so then it increases the sedentary lifestyle and it makes the symptoms even worse.
I have actually a couple of patients, they are basically gaining weight because of this remarks that people calling them names and start to become like basically way more withdrawn into their own environment. So they find no solutions. And it's coming back to the whole family issues, like one step at a time as discussed before me and you discussing and basically making a plan. We have to break that cycle. Other complications, we have so many of them. For example, overweight kids and obese kids, they have what you call obstructive sleep apnea. They don't sleep well because of the weight pushing so much on the chest and start making them like closing down their airway, and they start waking up So basically, they have less sleep and
less
become more
sleep,
stressed, and more stress become like more.
Exactly, and so it keeps adding to the cycle.
Yes.
Interesting. So it's interesting how there are so many loopholes or so many different pitfalls that you can go into, and it seems like adapting a healthy lifestyle, keeping your kids active, nutritious food, even a family adapting healthy eating patterns, and even maybe some mental health counseling. Getting some counseling to kind of help with your self-esteem, maybe nutrition counseling, something to kind of help give you some format to go by. We're visiting with Dr. Halal from the Clínicas Mi Doctor. We're going to open up the phone lines for any questions for our Talk to the Doc series. It's 214-787-1190. We'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to the Therapy Hour with Rusty Lozano, brought to you by the Center for Biofeedback and Behavior Therapy in Addison, Texas.
Hi, welcome back to the show. We are discussing childhood obesity, and we have Dr. Halal from the Clínicas Mi Doctor. We're going to open up the phone lines at 214-787-1190 for our Talk to the Doc series, and so you can call in and ask questions to Dr. Halal. Before we get started, though, I wanted to see if you'd like to share the story that you shared with me about your own experience with your weight loss.
Thank you, Rusty. Actually, that's basically something also I share with some of my patients that I found resistant for them to listen. And what happened that I usually do my own blood check every year. And I think maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I started to slow down, feeling tired easily, not having the same energy. And I did some blood work, and I found like my cholesterol was a little bit high. I think it was like reaching like 220. And I didn't like that. So what I did, I took initiatives, and I said, okay, I cannot breach what I'm not doing. So I stopped eating red meat, and I stopped eating eggs, and I started exercise a little bit more, not much. And what I told Rusty is basically 2 months or 3 months later, I said, okay, let me see where am I at. Do I need to take medicine now, or I'm doing the right thing? So I rechecked again the blood, and it came down to 165. The cholesterol went down to 165. So from that day on until now, I don't eat red meat or eggs unless like we're out certain occasions with families, but it's not part of my diet. And I don't miss it. I enjoy every single bit of chicken, fish, other food, vegetarian, and I don't miss it because I feel great.
Yeah. The offset is that it's the health and like it's the up feeling that you get. But the red meat component, that's I'm scratching my head because I love steak.
I'm in Texas, so that I have to watch what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if you're gonna eat red meat, you said that grilling it. If you're gonna have red meat, the best way to eat it is grilled.
Again, the grilling will be great. The way that you cook is no problem at all. I think frying is really not a really healthy way of eating, but it has to come with the pride that you eat, you exercise. That you have to put that in your mind. You have to burn it off.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's true. Whatever you put in your body, you have to take right back out. Correct. Well, let's take a caller. Hi, you're on the Therapy Hour.
Hi. I have a question about how I have a teenage daughter, and she is overweight, and I have always been uncomfortable with how to approach it with her because I want to be sensitive and focus on health, but not make her feel self-conscious, or I certainly don't want to initiate any kind of eating disorder or anything like that. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions for that.
That's a really very common questions, and I appreciate your questions, number one. And I think teenager is a particular breed. They are very sensitive, self-conscious, and they take everything, as you said, into self. So I think one of the best way to approach a teenager is basically discussing what do you think that is going on healthy and unhealthy. And I think they have a very, very solid idea and you will be amazed how much knowledge they know. And when you approach them in a way that they start the discussion, and you don't, the idea is basically with teenager is don't tell them, and that's what I usually tell my teenager too, and the families is basically don't tell them what to do. You need to open a discussion. What do you think is right? What do you think is wrong? How can we start? And you will be really, really amazed how many ideas that they bring up to the table and where you start. Sometimes you're confused, but I think when you start approaching your daughter this way, it becomes like really more in a way that basically becomes like really a discussion rather than an instructional conversation.
Yeah, so not making her feel bad about it, but getting her involved in the process.
I agree.
It makes it a little bit easier. Let's take another caller. Hi, welcome to the Therapy Hour.
Yeah, I was wondering, is there a certain age that you should put a child on a diet because you don't want them to feel bad either about what they're eating, but at the same time you want them to be healthy?
That is a great question. The age. I think any age. Just a short answer to your question is any age is the right age. We start seeing the trend of overweight all the way from infancy. Mothers now has tendency to feed the babies solid food way earlier than usual. We usually recommend starting baby food around anywhere between 4 and 6 months. If you are nursing, the later the better. But now we see I have kids or babies come to my clinic at 2 months or 3 months and they're already on solid food. We have a lot of kids after 1, they start like basically experimenting with adult food. So basically parents give them like sugars and snacks and ice cream and juice. And again, the older they get, they become like more a concrete part of their diets because they don't know better. They don't know anything different. So any time that you start is the time. And as I think we discussed Rusty in our show, is the beautiful thing about childhood obesity and the comorbidity and the illness is basically it is reversible. So when you start eating and acting healthy and become more exercise, all the effects that affect your liver, your prediabetes, and the complication of diabetes, God forbid, is basically reversible.
Interesting. That's how resilient we are. Actually, your body can consistently correct itself if given the right tools.
Because you're young, you have more ability, agility, and the body can correct itself. Correct.
Interesting. Let's take another caller. Hi, welcome to the Therapy Hour.
Hi, yes, I have a question, please.
Sure.
I have a preteen son, and he's slightly obese, and continuously working on him, trying to help him with healthy snacks. But at the end, he always feels like we're cheating him or limiting him or not giving him treats or sweets that other kids possibly get. What other options or what other things can I do to ensure him that what I'm doing is for his health?
Most of the teen, especially the boys, they are comparing themselves, I think, to other kids. And basically, they sit together and they see what they eat and what they consume. And the idea for especially a teenager is basically how active they are. If he's in a sport or after school programs and he is to eat more snacks, go ahead. And as a mother and as a parents, your job is basically giving him options of healthy snacks. Vegetables, fruits, fruit snacks. You have the bars that we talked about, and there are healthy bars and really bad ones. And the whole idea that basically you have to explain to him, you cannot burn 1,000 calories and eat 2,000 calories. It has to be like really matching. So what do you want? What do you think is the right amount based on your activity? So for example, today I have after school program. I'm going to play football. I'm going to have a basketball training. So I'm going to burn tons of calories. Mm-hmm. So my right is to have like really high protein diet with a lot of vegetables and fruit, very nutritious diet, so I can build the muscles. If I need snacks before I go home, yes. So it's a situation that has to be like measured from case to case, day to day. But definitely, our job as a parent is to provide our kids with different options, so they don't get bored. So there are always some options for them.
Yeah, you know, and that I think that a really clever way to do that would be make them be part of the process. How about trying to decide, hey, what are we having for dinner? Do you want to learn how to cook something? And getting their hands dirty with making a meal and empowering them.
Even better, they can take them for shopping too. So when we shop for their food, okay, go ahead. We go into the snack rack, and basically, what do you think? Let's discuss it. Let's see how much sodium you have there, how much cholesterol, how much saturated fat, how much stuff that you have there, and preservative and colors and all the stuff that basically is unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And once they are understanding that our concern and where we come from, they start thinking. Actually, I have parents that basically their kids in the dinner table, they start reading the labels, the nutrition labels. How much calories and how much serving. And once you start that, oh my God, I'm eating so much, so let me cut down on the ranch. Let me cut down on the ketchup. Because it's like we take it for granted. We're just dripping stuff and there's so much calorie. But when you read it, yes, they become like really more conscious.
Interesting. Yeah, because you keep track of the numbers and then you know how little or much you can have. I know my kid loves to drown his French fries in ketchup.
Here we go.
And he eats everything with ketchup. And so that's maybe not such a good thing.
So when they start reading the labels again, just give them, okay, I want you to read that and see how much you do
you
that.
Tell me out loud. What does it mean?
So what does it mean? So definitely we're like, oh, okay, I think that's not healthy. And once you start the discussion, I mean, as I mentioned, they are very smart and they listen. And sometimes we don't think they listen, but they listen very well.
Yeah, and they're watching. They're always watching what you're doing. So if you set the example as well, and make it an entire family process, as we discussed, then it'll be a lot easier. Then they'll assimilate and they'll learn because these kids are not set in their ways. Their little personalities haven't really developed, and their routine is still very flexible, and so there's opportunity there. There certainly is.
And again, remember the statistics in the beginning. If you have one parent that's overweight, 80% of the kids, they have tendency to be overweight, and exactly what you said, they are watching.
Yes.
So they do what we tell them to do and what actually we're doing rather than because sometimes we say something and we do the opposite thing. So you're right.
Fascinating. It never surprises me. Well, it always surprises me. Let me say that when we learn more about how to raise our kids, it even goes beyond just changing behaviors and trying to be a good parent and try to help them make good choices. But it's really about the foods that they eat. Dr. Halal, thank you so much for being on the show. You can find Dr. Halal. You can reach him at 469-298-1216. Clínicas Mi Doctor from Plano, Texas. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rusty. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you again.